Leanne is an occupational hygienist at OCal here in the Toronto clinic. She has a wide-ranging technical knowledge of industrial hygiene, health, safety, and environment, where she recognizes potential health and safety hazards in various industries and assists to review and revise company standard operating procedures to mitigate the hazards. She has extensive experience with problem solving, examination, and investigation relating to occupational and environmental hazard management and risk assessment. She's conducted numerous industrial hygiene testing to evaluate occupational exposure to chemical hazards such as asbestos, nitrogen dioxide, crystalline silica, and hazardous physical agents such as radiation, lasers, and noise. And we're so happy to have her with us working tiredly with Danielle Drolet on this tool, and we wanted to bring updates to you because we spoke about it last year and we've updated it to the new regs and have a next version in the pipeline to tell you about for a sneak peek. So go ahead, Shirley.
Thank you for the introduction. And today I just want to introduce you to our occupational adjustment tool and review some new features, upcoming features that will be launched in the next update. So the new beta version of the OEL adjustment tool. So this tool is brought to you by OCal and the Occupational Disease Action Plan contributors that was mentioned in the previous presentation, and the acknowledgement from Ministry of Labor for compliance purposes. So here I just want to show, this is the current OEL adjustment tool that is live on our website under the Occupational Health app tool and the calculator tab. And you can download it onto your computer and use it offline. So you don't need internet for this. And the aim for this tool is to account for the irregular work shift, as irregular work shifts are now more common in many industries, and the standard 8-hour workday or the 40-hour work week is often not the reality, but is, however, the basis of how the OEL, the time-weighted average occupational exposure limit, is applied. So we want to bring you to this tool to adjust for the change in real life. The reason why is that when a worker is exposed to workplace chemicals, the chemicals are absorbed into the body, and the amount absorbed, or the dose, depends on the concentration of chemicals and the length of the time exposure takes place. So it also depends on how quickly the chemical is removed from the body. And this is a dynamic process where the chemical are absorbed, eliminated at the same time. So if the chemical is absorbed faster, then it can be eliminated. The material will accumulate in the target organs. And if there's more time for the chemical to accumulate, the less time for it to be eliminated, then that is the case when the length of the workday is increased. So it is assumed that the time away from work will be contamination-free, and ideally the concentration of material remain in the body should be 0 at the start of the next day's work. So the aim is to keep the chemical concentration in the target organs from exceeding the level determined by the TLV for 8 hours a day or 5 days a week for 40-hour work week, regardless of the shift length. So to account for irregular work shift and minimize the impact of exposure to chemical during irregular shift on the worker's health, the exposure standard adjustment have increasingly become essential components in the workplace exposure assessment. The threshold level are guidelines outlined by various jurisdictions based on their own criteria, and as such, the threshold values are to be used by professional occupational hygienists, and the TLVs will not be protective of all workers under all scenarios. But this tool can be used in a fast way to calculate adjusted TWA to provide a guideline, but it is the user's responsibility to fully understand the limitation and application of this tool, so you can use it to the scenario in their own workplace. And again, I want to reiterate, this tool is by no means to replace professional hygiene services. And 2 more notes. If you decide to use this tool, unusual work schedules are not defined the same as work shift. So where work is done outside of the normal working hours, such as not at night. So issues surrounding shift work are not addressed in the tools. And days or week is shorter than when the work day or work week hours is shorter than the 8-hour work day or 40-hour work week, the TLV, time weighted average, should not be increased. So this tool is only used for extended work shift. You should never calculate the adjusted TLV to be higher than the guideline. Okay. So the version available right now only has the compliance piece, and here's what the front page of the tool looks like. It has a disclaimer, and then it has one start button. So for compliance side of the OEL tool, it allows for calculation adjusted workplace exposure limit for unusual or extended work shifts. Ontario accepted methodology set out in the guide for the adjustment of permissible exposure value for unusual work schedule published by IRSST, which is outlined in March 2015. So this method is used in Quebec, and it's referenced by the ACGIH and other health and safety organizations. They consider the toxicological information of each substance, and each substance with an exposure limit is categorized based on its toxic effect. And the assigned category is then used to determine if any adjustment is required, and if so, what equations used. And in assigning any substance to a particular adjustment category, the most recent toxicological information has been reviewed, and these include sensitization, irritation, organ toxicity, reproductive system toxicity, and teratogenicity. So for the purpose in Ontario, we compiled 773 chemicals listed in the Ontario Regulation 833, Table 1, which is the Ontario Table of Occupational Exposure Limits, and assigned the adjustment category based on Quebec model, following the adjustment code rule. So as you can see here on the right side, they are examples of each categories of chemicals that fall under each category. And here I just want to quickly show how the Quebec model categorizes the chemicals based on its toxicological information. So for substance regulated by a ceiling value or has toxicological information that shows that it is an irritant or asphyxiant or a chemical presenting a safety risk or a low health risk, where the half-life is less than 4 hours, then no adjustment is needed. For substance that produce effects following short-term exposure, then it's adjusted for daily exposure. And then for long-term produce effects following long-term exposure is adjusted for weekly exposure. And lastly, for substance that produce both short-term and long-term exposure, then both daily and weekly adjustment value will be calculated, and then the most conservative of the two will be applied. So here I just want to show you an example of gasoline because it has a potential to produce effects following short-term exposure. It's assigned adjustment category of 2, and then it is adjusted for daily schedule. So when you use this tool, you will need to either click on the top to find gasoline in the scroll down list, or you can search through the CAS number to get to gasoline. And then you have to manually put in the daily schedule. And here the example is 10. And based on the adjustment equation, the tool calculates the adjustment factor. And here, because it's 10, the adjustment factor is 0.8. And then therefore the adjusted TWA for gasoline for 8-hour daily work shift is decreased from 300 ppm to 240 ppm. Okay, so now quickly to the new exciting features that we have for the beta version. We have now included a health-based database that is OCal owned, and compared to the current compliance-based OEI adjustment tool, the new data version add a new path. As you can see here, it has a compliance on top, and then we add a new path to the health-based. So we have decided to create a health-based database for the adjustment tool because we want to consider all the exposure limits for the chemical agents internationally, as some chemicals have lower exposure limits value in other countries. due to the extended research on that chemicals in certain countries. So the database that we reference, it's there's a few, but the main one is GESTIS, the International Limit Value for Chemical Agents. And this database contains a collection of occupational limit value for hazardous substance gathered from 33 lists from 28 countries. And for some countries, they might have more than one institute for occupational limit values. As in, for example, Canada has both Quebec and Ontario, and then Germany has two institutes, the AGS and the DFG. So that's why even for 28 countries, there's 33, basically 33 database that this database compiles. And so in addition, we also refer to the occupational exposure limits set by ACGIH and NIOSH and the WorkSafe BC as well to compile a database that has a comprehensive occupational exposure limit values. So as our objective for the occupational adjustment tool for the health-based portion of the tool is to keep the concentration of workplace chemical in the target organ below the level where harmful effects would be observed. Brief and scalar model, adjustment model, it's applied, and this is the most protective and the conservative approach. It is one of the first model used for adjustment for unusual work schedule. It provides an adjustment components for both the longer work days and the corresponding shorter recovery period. So the method applies to all chemicals regardless of their half-lives and consists of two parts, daily adjustment and the weekly adjustment. Here I'm just showing you the equation for both. And for all chemicals, these two values will be calculated and the worst case scenario of the two is used. And
really, I just wondered, sorry, I just want to make sure, I think you only have couple of slides left here.
Yes, I have 2 slides left.
Perfect, okay.
Yes. Yes, so here I'm just want to show quickly on the GESTIS, the gasoline as an example again. So we went through 780 chemicals agents in the database one by one, and then to look at the lowest, the threshold limit value internationally for each chemicals. And for gasoline, as you can see here, for Ontario, it's at 300 ppm, but then there's a lower value in Norway that's published in 2021, I believe, and the limit is 50. So in that case, for gasoline, we take the value from Norway. And so here's an example for the gasoline, again, for the health base. We applied brief and scalar model for all chemicals. And for this example that I'm showing, for gasoline, we put in 10 hours for the daily schedule and 40 hours for the weekly schedule. And because the daily schedule, it's more severe, so the adjustment, TWA, is adjusted for the 10-hour daily schedule, so it's dropped from 50 to 35 ppm. And the new feature added on here that we actually put in the source. So here you can see the arrow pointing that the number is coming from Norway and is published in 2021. So this keeps the database to the most recent value, and you can trace the source. And that's my last slide. And I just want to thank my team at OCal who spent countless hours looking at databases and numbers, and also Daniel Joulet, who did the backend programming and the make tool very easily accessible and user-friendly. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shirley. Thanks for sharing. So stay tuned, folks. We put a link in for the compliance-based tool, and stay tuned for the health-based button coming your way soon.